Well, Mark, thanks for joining us. Right before we came on, I kind of gave everybody a little bit of an update. And one thing I didn't tell everybody because we did content code this time instead of Twitter, but the way that Mark and I met, we were connected on Twitter. We were connected locally in Knoxville, and one day we just reached out and said, "Hey, let's meet for lunch and talk." And at the time, Mark had just left a corporate executive position and was sort of figuring out what he was going to do next. He just started blogging, and we kind of talked through that, some of the things that he was working on, and really got to know each other pretty well over the course of several years. And my social networking sort of went like this, and Mark's sort of went like this, and working with the international speaker, et cetera, et cetera. But nevertheless, like I said before we started, Mark is a real expert within social, and we're honored to have you here. So, with that, welcome.
I am delighted to be here. Hello, Chattanooga, or wherever you may be. And I'm really happy that you used the content code this time. I think it's my best book, and I might even argue that it's my best life's professional work. I really think it's that good of a book. I think it's an important book. Right before we got on here, I got an email from Sprinkler, which is a big social media monitoring company, one of the biggest. And they just bought 100 books to give out to their customers. So I mean, that's really great validation that it's being considered, a serious book, a helpful book, and I hope you guys like it. If you want to get into the marketing business, PR, communications, I mean, this is the stuff in the book is what you really need to know in this era that we're in.
I would agree with that, Mark. One of the things that I told them is what you guys did for us at BPV and coming in and really taking the theory behind content code and then putting that into application. And I think it's been valuable for us. In fact, we talked about it in our marketing huddle this morning. It shaped the way that we think about content because it has to be highly effective content as it gets into the stream, because there's no reason, and Mark knows, and and I've told the class, I mean, we spend $600,000-$700,000 a year generally for content. I mean, that's really what our content creation is, and so you can't spend a full marketing budget essentially to create all this content and then it just kind of go out into a pond as opposed to going into the stream.
Well, how you want to kick this off with some questions? Do you think are your students, have they just started the book, or are they pretty much through it?
So we just started. We had fall break last week, so we started it 2 weeks ago, and so I think we're several chapters in. So definitely not all the way through. One of the things I thought might be nice, Mark, is since we didn't read Dow Twitter, it might be nice if you could give a nutshell there, and then we can talk content code.
Okay. Well, I've been very fortunate that the book has been very popular. It's the most popular book on Twitter in the world, and it has been for several years now. And it's kind of a cool story of how it started. When I was getting into Twitter, I hated it. I thought it was the stupidest thing I'd ever seen. And I can remember I had a friend here in Knoxville, and she was kind of teaching me how to do it. And all of a sudden, these people started following me who I didn't know who they were. And that this is just freaking me out. This is the spookiest thing. I'm not sure I really like this. And it took me about 6 months to really figure Twitter out. And my problem was I was getting all caught up in the technology and figuring out mentions, and hashtags were just starting. And what I realized is that there's really a human pulse through Twitter. And so I wanted to write about that. All the other books on the market about Twitter just kind of missed it. They made it too difficult. And so I wanted to talk about the human element, the human pulse of Twitter. So I talked to some book publishers, and the book publishers said, well, you have to write a 240-page book. A 240-page book is about this big. So I didn't want to write a 240-page book. It's too long about Twitter. I wanted to write a little book that someone could read on an airline flight and get it. So they said, well, you got to write a long book. So I said, I'm just going to write it on my own. So I self-published. And this is an interesting lesson because the publishing industry didn't pick me. I picked myself. And I decided to do this on my own, and the book just started selling like crazy. Then I wrote another book for McGraw-Hill called Return on Influence, and they saw how well the Twitter book was doing, and they said, we want to buy the rights. So eventually they got the rights to Tile of Twitter as well. I'm not sure that was the best decision in the world. I don't think it really affected the sales at all. But so that's a little background of how I got started on the book. I wrote it in 2011. The McGraw-Hill edition came out in 2012. There's a new edition in 2014, and I'm in talks with McGraw-Hill about maybe coming out with something else in 2016 or 2017. I can't hear you. Did you say something? Can't hear you.
No, I was muted. No, you're good.
Okay. And coincidentally, the new book, The Content Code, I went back to self-publishing. I published 3 books through a publisher in New York, and I'm having more success, probably selling more books and making more money on my own than through a publisher. And the publishing industry is just kind of broken right now. So if you've got the idea for maybe trying to write a book, it's pretty easy to publish on your own these days, and not very expensive.
So talk about that for just a second. I know that's a little bit off topic, but there's this phenomena. You know, I think some people might ask, well, why would I want to write a book in the first place at all? There's this phenomena I think that happens, especially among speakers, but when you write a book, regardless, and this is not a statement about you, it's a statement about some of our friends, regardless of how good the book is, all of a sudden it gives you instant legitimacy and instant credibility.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit and what you see, especially because you have most of your friends have written a book that are in the circuit.
Yeah. You know, that's a good question. I'm not sure if it gives you instant legitimacy or not. I mean, it does open a door. You know, you are now the author of a book, and whether you go through a publisher or you self-publish, nobody really knows these days. I mean, you guys have the new book. It's a beautiful book. I hired a professional designer. I hired a professional editor. I put money into promotion and marketing the book that the book company would never do. You know, I think things do sort out. I mean, the cool thing about my book is the momentum is still building. If you look at some other people that, you know, like you said, they're kind of iffy about their content and their books. I mean, they had like a big launch and then it just kind of died. But all of my books have continued to sell regularly. What I find happening is that one person, they'll love one book and they'll start buying the others. So that's pretty cool. I mean, this is really, like I said, I wrote my first book in 2011, and this year, 2015, is really the first year I'm making, you know, some decent money on the book. So it took about 4 years or 5 years and 5 books to really get that momentum going. I mean, they've all sold pretty well over the years, but this year the momentum has been good, has been especially good.
That's great. So tell a little backstory. What was going on? And I know just based on our conversations, but what was going on that really was the impetus of writing Content Code?
Well, it was very simple. Here's the whole reason why I wrote it. In January 6th of 2014, I wrote a blog post called Content Shock. And if you've read the first chapters of the Content Code, you already kind of know what that is. So what I proposed in this blog post was that the economics of content are changing. A few years ago, content was still a novelty on the web. If you wanted to start a blog or a podcast or a video series, it was pretty easy. You could get readers, you could get viewers, but now that these publishing tools are available to everybody and companies are figuring out that social media marketing really works, the amount of content being published is going up, 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 up. And in any human system, economic system, or natural system, when there's too much stuff, something's got to change. And the cost of competing with content is going to be different than it was a few years ago. And that was what this blog post was about. It was one of the most popular marketing blog posts ever written. It received over 1,200 comments. More than 1,000 other blog posts have been written about my blog post. And it's now showing up in books, in panels, in speeches at big conferences. The term Content Shock was recently added to an online glossary of SEO terms. And so I was really interested in this topic of, okay, I'm a marketing strategist. What do we do with all this content? How do we stand out? So I was listening to this podcast, and this guy asked another guy on the podcast. He said, well, Mark Schaefer wrote this blog post, and he said that things are different now. Do you think he has a point? And this guy has a big content marketing agency, and he laughed. He said, no, and he paused, and he said, great content will always rise to the top, period. And I thought, that guy is not only wrong, he's dangerous. Because that's simply not true. If any of you wrote a blog post today, and you wrote the exact same blog post that I wrote, it would go nowhere. Why did my post ignite? Well, it was a combination of things. And that's what the book is about. Is for a small business, or any business, just publishing isn't enough. It doesn't create any economic value unless people see it, unless people share it. And am I still on the call?
Yeah, you're still here. The video got a little delayed, but it's fine now.
Yeah, the screen just went blank, so I'm not seeing you at all. So anyway, so I'll just continue on.
Yeah, we can all see you now.
Okay, I can't. Yeah, I didn't. I don't know what happened. I can't see you, but so you could be making faces at me. You could be sticking out your tongue. I don't really know. But so I'll just keep going. So anyway, so that was the genesis of the book, and it's a big idea because everyone is struggling. This is affecting every business, big and small. How do we get value from this content that we're publishing? And so what I'm suggesting in the book is that every marketing agency, every marketing department is going to have to focus on ignition. They're going to have to take that book and say, do that. And it's very interesting. Jeremy, I don't know if you ever get a chance to talk to this guy. Right down in Chattanooga, there's a guy that is the marketing director of, I can't remember the name of it. It's like CBL or something like that. They run the mall in Chattanooga.
Right.
And they run all the malls. His name is Brian Lutz. It looks like Lutz, L-U-T-Z, but it's pronounced Lutz. And he's the first person I know of that hired people specifically for marketing ignition. So he might even be someone interesting to have in your class sometime. He's right there in Chattanooga. Really nice guy. But I think that's the future.
Right.
I think learning the techniques that are in the book, that's the future. As Jeremy said, we did an analysis of his company's content, and it helped him really reframe how he looked at content.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think that the danger is, and we've talked about this a while. One of the things that was a big topic, obviously, at HubSpot's inbound this year was content creation, and one of the most fascinating quotes that I heard was 90% of people will forget the content that they've read, not just that they've seen. That, I mean, the percentage there is much higher, but the percentage of people that read content will forget all of because there's so much coming across. And, the quote that they had was, I think I've forgotten this before. I thought that captured where we are in a content world so well, because we are seeing so much and just recreating more and not differentiating, not being particular to an audience, not building your brand, all of those things can be a real challenge. So I guess one of the questions is, how does someone, as they're putting their content plan together, does it matter, I guess, whether they have the massive growth like you were talking about, the content shock post, or does it matter if they have a higher concentration of just the audience that they're trying to reach? What are your thoughts on that?
Say that last sentence again. What was just repeat the question?
Yeah, so say you had 14, you said 1,400 or whatever number of blog posts written about content shock. What if you just had 1,400 people that read it out of a total audience of 2,000? Is that concentration enough of your audience, or do you think that you need that broad distribution of content?
Well, that's a good question. It really depends on your goals. There's a great quote from a guy up in Louisville, Kentucky, named Jason Falls, and he said, really, I only need 6 readers of my blog, but they better be the right 6 readers. As a consultant, all I need is 6 customers to keep me going. As long as I have 6 people reading my blog and they're buying from me, that's pretty concentrated. But most people aren't that lucky. And so it is kind of a numbers game, where it's just like in sales. You've got to have so many people visiting your site before they make an inquiry. And then those number of inquiries, a very small percentage of those is going to turn into a lead. And a very small percentage of those is going to turn into a sale. So the odds are a lot better, generally, if you have more people viewing your content, more people reading your content. And so to me, it is important to grow my audience. And I have a chapter in the book, I think it's around chapter 6 or 7, called the Alpha Audience. And this is really probably the most popular chapter in the book. The ideas I have in that book really have resonated with people. And the idea here is that not everybody in your audience is equal, and that too heavily today we rely on driving traffic to websites. There is a certain value to that for some businesses, but most of these people are tourists. They come, they look at your site, they never come back. They don't sign up. They're just tourists. What you really want to focus on are the people that stay. Not just stay, the people who share your content. Those are the ones who are really driving the economic value of your marketing. And I asked a lot of businesses, do you know who are the people who share your content the most? And every business I've talked to said, we don't know. So it's an elite group. It's usually less than 2% of the people who are in your social media audience. So we need to know those people, nurture those people, reward those people, and turn that 2% into 3%, and 3% into 4%. And if we can do that, the awareness of our business, the organic advocacy that we're building by getting people to share content. Because when people share content, this is different than a like. When people like something on Facebook, they just kind of wave at it. They say hello, kind of pat it on the head. But when you share content in a virtual way, you're standing up and saying, I believe in this, and you should too. I was inspired by this. I learned something from this, and I think it'll help you. So 85% of this is. It's interesting, the statistic that you mentioned, because the New York Times did this research in 2013, and they said 85% of the people that share your content, maybe that's different than reading it, the 85% of the people who actually read it and share it say, I understand what this is about. I wouldn't have shared it if I didn't. So getting people to share your content, understanding who that alpha audience is a very, very important part of marketing today.
So personally, will you talk just a second about building your own audience and sort of where that's taken you? Because you think back to us meeting at Aubrey's, you had written a few posts, and just talk about the journey of being the writer and where that's taken you.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I think building a personal brand is very important today for all of you. I don't know if blogging is part of this class or another class, or if you've ever thought about it, but I think every person that is going to be looking for a job should be blogging. It's a way for you to demonstrate what you can do. It's a way to show that you can write and communicate and perhaps build an audience. At the bottom of the resume, put a link to your blog, and as you're finished with your interview, you say, hey, I had a great time meeting you today, but don't just take my word for it that I can do this job. Read my blog, and they will, and they'll spend 30 minutes more with you maybe than someone else that they're interviewing. So doing that extra thing, building your personal brand, demonstrating these skills is really important as you go out into the job market. Now, as far as my journey, I've been asked a lot about, I've got this worldwide audience today. Tens of thousands of people read my blog and listen to my podcast now, which is a lot of fun. It's called The Marketing Companion. If you'd like to check it out sometime, we always try to be hilarious. So there wasn't really any one really signature event, I think. I got to meet the guys in the Black Keys one time, the band, the Black Keys. And they're friends of my son. And, they kind of had this steady growth. They had made, I think, 5 records before they really had a hit. And that's kind of the way I was. I mean, I just kept blogging and learning and growing, and I really didn't it took about 9 months for me to really start getting a few readers and commenters, and it took about 2 years for the slope really to start to go up. And an interesting, a very, very interesting thing that I talk about in the book is this idea that's central to building a personal brand, and that's trust. There's a story in the book, it's later in the book, you probably haven't gotten to it yet, about this PR professional in Washington, D.C. And she shares every single piece of content that I write, even if she doesn't read it. And I interviewed her for the book. I said, "Why would you do this?" And she said, "Because I trust you. You've never let me down. I share your content with my audience, with my family, and with my friends because I know you're never going to let me down." And I love hearing that because I've built this trust with my audience. My blog is not filled with ads. It's not filled with promotions. I'm not selling stuff. I'm writing great, helpful, useful content that people love. And eventually, these are the people who connect with me, who call me, who buy my books. And that's how you monetize, by building the brand and building trust over time. Last week, it's funny, I got a call from a lady who's read my blog for years, at least 3 years. She's read all my books. She lives in New York, and I haven't met her in person yet. We're going to. She said, I have this friend that works for a big agency in New York, and she's got a big, big social media problem. Would you be willing to talk to her? I said, sure. So here's someone who I really haven't heard from too much, but she's read my blog for years. She doesn't owe me anything, but she gave me this lead, and the lead ended up being working on a project for Dan & Yogurt and the NFL. And that's how the business works. Because I wasn't selling my services through the blog, but I was building trust through the blog. And it led now to this new opportunity in New York where I'm going to be working with this big international brand in the NFL. So that's how it works.
So one of the things I think that's different, Mark, is that you have a very large following on your blog, but you really invest time, like you just said, you haven't gotten to meet her yet. You invest time whenever you're traveling internationally. You go out of your way to make phone calls, reach out to audience. Is that translatable to a brand?
Ah, good question. Very, very good question. Well, when you build an audience on social media, they are weak relational links. And that is a big misunderstanding for a lot of people. They'll look at my Twitter audience, and I don't know how many people follow me now. It's over 100,000 people, but they'll say, well, all these people follow Mark Schaefer. If he could just promote something for us, we would sell this thing like hotcakes. And it just doesn't work that way. These are weak relational links. Now, the people who actually read my blog and listen to my podcast, they feel like they know me. And so it's a stronger link because I'm part of the fabric of their life. They start every morning by reading my blog. They listen to my podcast in the car. I had this great story the other day. There's a guy in Seattle. He just started listening to my podcast. So he went back and he's listening to every episode. We've had 60 episodes. He's been listening to everyone in the car. So he was on a family vacation. And he said, hey, do you mind if I listen to a podcast while we're going on this trip? And his 10-year-old son said, yeah, Dad, hey, play that one with Mark and Tom. I like that one. It's funny. So this is an example of how this is not just a passive person. he is now binge listening to my content. His kids are even in the scene. I've become part of the fabric of their life. Now, when you really take it to another level is when you meet somebody. So as Jeremy said, Jeremy is one of my closest friends. We've done lots of different collaborative activities together, but we kind of met through Twitter. But things didn't really start to come together until you meet in person, and then you never know where it will lead. So social media can open the doors. Consistent engagement can start to build these connections, and the real magic and the most fun part of the job is meeting these people in life. Now, how does that scale to a brand? It's really interesting, but the biggest companies, the best companies, they are trying to create a very human presence with their social media. So an example that I love, one of my customers, is the Bank of Ireland. So if you go in the Bank of Ireland, they have two different Twitter accounts. One is Bank of Ireland, and the other one is Talk to Bank of Ireland or something like that. So the Talk to Bank of Ireland is kind of their service people, and they'll say stuff like, "Hey, is anybody at the arts festival in Killarney today? Send us some pictures. It's a beautiful day there. Hey, how about that rugby team? Aren't they doing great?" And they're talking to people on Twitter just like you would talk to a friend. And why not? That's how relationships get built. And they put their initial after every tweet, after every Facebook post, so there's a real person here. And if you click on the link on their Twitter account, you can see their name and their face and what they do. So the best businesses are trying to figure out, how do we connect our people with the people who need us in the field?
So let me kind of take the extension. It's one of our mutual friends, John Jantz. We've had a debate before about building personal brand versus building your corporate brand, and building your personal brand. I think we finally agree that it is much easier than building the corporate brand. For a number of reasons, but one of the things I think you've done is sort of you've met those two in the middle. Your personal brand sort of became your a business brand in a way, from the standpoint of what you've been able to do with the different books that you've written, with having our social media conference here in Knoxville. What you were able to do was grow a base of people that were advocates for you. So while it definitely is difficult, I think, to build that, to have that personalization yourself, when you get these brand advocates that are out there building your brand for you, which I think you have lots of people that assume that you're a trusted source, or they know you're a trusted source because of their past interaction. They become your advocates. They help you grow Social Fresh. They help you, Social Slam. They help you grow, the different events that you're involved in. And, talk a little bit about that. And I think that ties in with the content code and with some of the alpha audience. But getting them impassioned to be your advocates and carrying your story out there.
It's funny. There's a quote in the book. At first, it was a little alarming to me. It was from this guy named Chris Brogan, and Chris is a real pioneering blogger, one of the first real social media people on the scene. And his quote was, "I'm not trying to build an audience. I'm trying to build allies." And when I first read that, it almost struck me as almost like had a militaristic kind of tone to it. But I think what he's saying is it's just another word for advocates, really. But he's trying to build a group of people that he can count on, that he can rely on, that he can eventually turn to and ask for a favor. And I think it does come from being honest, from being helpful. I don't really think you can fake that on the web, and you guys probably know that as well as anybody. I mean, you can tell someone who's a poser in 140 characters. It's just going to come through. And so, if you really are a genuine person who wants to help people, who likes to connect with people, you can do very well in this space. And that's why Chris has done so well. And he has surrounded himself with so many allies because he genuinely cares about people. He genuinely listens, genuinely wants to help people. And so he's not just a personal brand. He's a heroic brand. People share his content and read his content no matter what he writes. He could write the biggest piece of crap. People are still going to read it and share it because they just love him. It's almost like, you get hooked on a soap opera. And, sometimes a soap opera is good, sometimes a soap opera is bad, but you still watch it because you've got that emotional connection. I'm a big fan of Saturday Night Live. Went through some terrible years. I still watched it because I had an emotional connection, had a history, and that's what Chris is trying to do. He's trying to build these allies, and I guess I have allies, and as Jeremy said, lots of advocates, but I can't say that it was a mindful activity. I can't say I was smart enough to say this is my goal. I just, I'm at a place in my life where, I've had a great business career. I'm a teacher, and I love to help people. I love to connect, and there's nothing more rewarding than when someone says, "You really helped me. You changed my life in some way. You changed my business in some way." And so it's just something I genuinely like to do, and I've been rewarded back, I guess, for what I give.
That's great. I agree with that.
Have you ever had an experience where you've been burned by that? Like I'm definitely seeing the internet as more of a collaborative place.
Yeah.
Like a writer and comic book writer, and he's literally connected to people on Twitter, and now they're writing a book together. And someone is this art for absolutely free and had never met my husband until they were halfway through the book.
Yeah.
Have you ever been burned in a situation where you've kind of reached out to collaborate with a stranger, or if you think about plagiarism or all these kind of things?
Well, one quick thing, that the story about the comic book writer and the collaboration. If Jeremy could give you my email, that would make actually a nice little mention. I'm sure I'll be updating the Twitter book someday. So if you guys see little case studies, little examples like that, I'm always looking for fresh things I can put in the new book. That might be fun. Well, I get burned all the time. Wherever corruption can occur, corruption will occur, and people do take advantage of me. One of the most extreme examples, it was just absolutely ridiculous, but I mean, it happens. When I wrote that Content Shock article, the thing just took off, right? So everybody's trying to get on the bandwagon. So this guy writes a blog post, and he criticized my post, which is fine. But not only did he criticize it, he didn't even do it very well. It's almost like he didn't even read the article. And he was just so anxious to write something that he wrote an article that didn't even really make sense. It didn't even address my points. But who cares, right? So he sends me this note, this email, and he said, "I wrote this article about your post. Will you promote it for me?" Now, remember, he's writing this against what I wrote. And it's terrible. But I said, you know what? I remember what it's like to be a beginning blogger. I will do it. I will promote your negative, lousy post. I didn't say it in those words, but I promoted it. I put it on Twitter, tweeted it a couple times. So another guy wrote an outstanding post about the Content Shock article. It was progressive. It was thinking through the implications. It was taking it to the next level. So I put that on Twitter. And I put it, I think, on Google+. Well, this guy is now the first guy is angry. Why didn't I put his article on Google+? And I said, do you realize, are you guys there?
Yeah.
Okay, because I heard these little sounds. And I said, do you realize what you're asking me to do? I did a favor for you nobody else would do. They're promoting, your critic. Well, this guy just went crazy. And he started like stalking me, and he was like a troll all over the internet. And it wasn't just me. He did this to a lot of people. I've had people steal my blog posts all the time. I had a very, very well-known writer steal key cons. I sent him a preview copy of one of my books because I wanted to get a testimony from him on the book. So he read this book, and he was writing his own book. He took a big section out of my book, put it in his book, used one of my key words as like his catchphrase for the book. Never even gave me any attribution. That's been done several times in books. I had one guy basically write a whole book based on a concept I had in the Tao of Twitter book, and admitted that he stole it from me. There are people out there who have digitized my books and are selling digital copies of my books with me not getting any money. So there's a lot of corruption out there. And what I found is, the bigger you get, the bigger target you are. And you just have to stay centered. You just have to concentrate on the good people and the good things on the web. You have to block out the toxicity. Once in a while, if something really, really bad happens, you need to address it. You need to call people out, and if they're stealing your money, basically what they're doing with some of the plagiarism. But it's impossible. People are stealing my content every single day, all around the world, and there's nothing you can really do about it.
Just a quick question, and I know everybody's got some questions, so I won't hog the space. But I know at one time you were looking for a tool, and I think there were a few things out there that you looked to try and prevent people from or at least be notified of people stealing your content. Where are you at in that search? Are you still trying things out, or?
There's a couple different ideas. One of the best ideas really is in every blog post, if you put some phrase that's kind of unique to you, that you're not going to get 1 million hits on it on Google. You're going to get one, and then you can search that and see if anybody's stealing your content. But who has time for that? I've written 2,000 blog posts. There's some other things out there, but just the energy simply isn't worth it. And if there's anybody big that really plagiarizes something, it's going to get back to me. It's going to get back to me. One of the strangest things, a guy I really, really admire, Rand Fishkin of Moz, basically copied my Content Shock post. He came out with a blog post almost just like it, with a graph almost just like it, like 3 or 4 days after mine. And people, I don't know if he just thought, I can get away with this because nobody ever heard of this Mark Schaefer guy. Maybe he didn't hear about me, but we have intersecting audiences, and a lot of people said, hey, dude, you copied the guy. So on his article, he actually gave me credit.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, he rewrote the article and gave me credit, but.
Wow. All right, so questions. We'll open up the floor.
This is your big chance, guys. I charge a lot of money for answering questions.
All right, I'm focused on the classroom. You guys are in the spotlight.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You were talking about identifying your alpha users. What do you prefer tool-wise to kind of identify those? Because there's a couple tools out there.
Well, what tools do you know? Because maybe you can teach me something. I mean, is there something that you use that might help you with that?
No, I don't use any. I was just curious, like, you know.
Okay. Well, here's the challenge. So if you use these analytic tools, you're going to see mentions, and you're going to see retweets, and you might see sentiment. So, but might not be enough. So I'll give you an example. I went to South by Southwest this year, and my friend took a picture of me with a buddy, and they posted this on Twitter and Facebook. And some lady tweeted when she saw the picture. She said, "Those are my two favorite bloggers." Now, I'd never heard of this lady before. She had never tweeted me. She had never commented on my blog. But she's telling me in this one single tweet, "You're my favorite. You're special. I love you." I need to know who those people are. And sometimes you're never going to hear from them because maybe they share your content on email or on text messages. You can't really track it. But a lot of times you may only get these small, strong signals, like one tweet saying, "I love you, you're the best." Or what if you could see that one young guy in Austin, Texas, only tweets 4 or 5 times a month, but of those 5 tweets, 3 of them are about you and your content. If you look at normal analytics, that will never show up. So we have to find a way to not be lazy marketers anymore. And I'm still figuring this out myself. But what the first step I'm taking is I'm watching for signals of unusual loyalty. I might use that. I might make a blog post about that. Signals of unusual loyalty. The SUL. And so here, the other day, I saw this lady on Facebook. She bought all of my books. She bought all 5 books, and she stacked them up on her couch and took a picture of it. And I don't really know the lady very well, but I thought, that is really extraordinary. She bought all 5 of my books. So I looked up her website, and I got her phone number, and I called her up. And I said, "I just wanted to thank you. I think that's wonderful that you bought these books." And so she was absolutely dumbfounded. She never expected to get a call. But now she's teaching a college class. She's buying all of my books for all of her college classes. She's taking my books and giving them away whenever she does public speaking because I reinforced this idea that, hey, you love me, I love you back. And so we need to pay attention to those people. The other thing I'm doing is when I find these extraordinary people, I put them on a special Twitter list. And I can follow that list and pay attention. What are they doing? You know, does something big happen to them? You know, there's no way to really put people on lists on LinkedIn yet that I know of. But that might be another thing, is to kind of follow them on, you know, put them on special lists, follow what they're doing, see if they got a promotion or something nice happens to them. Tweet their content every once in a while. So, you know, it's a new idea, but I think it's absolutely critical to find those people and reward those people because they're the bedrock of our business.
That's good. So one of the things, Roger, you were talking about, just some tools. Mark actually wrote a book about Clout. So he spent time with the founders of Clout, and he mentioned you mentioned the book earlier. But I think that's one tool that some people try to assign their alpha audience. They try to determine who that is. And there's tools out there that will aggregate an audience. They'll look through your Twitter and they'll try and figure out who would be the best promoter of you. Mark, you want to talk about Clout at all?
Yeah, it's Klout, and they were bought last year by a company called Lithium, and they've been kind of a controversial company because what they try to do is they look at all the data, that all the stuff that you are posting on Twitter and Facebook, YouTube, wherever you are, and they use big data analytics, and they try to predict how influential you are based on what you're posting on the internet and how people react to that. So the bad part of it is it feels kind of icky to be graded like that. But the positive thing is, for a company or a brand, is you could argue whether it really means influence or not, but here's what it means. Clout is a very good indicator of a person's relative ability to move content. And you know what? That's a big deal. That's the alpha audience. So I'm getting some feedback all of a sudden.
Yeah, I'm going to mute the class real quick. How's that?
Yeah. So I think Clout can be a useful tool. So there's a free application that can help you organize Twitter called Hootsuite. And there's a premium version. It's like $9 a month or something. And you can put all your social media accounts in one place. And one of the things you can do is you can see who's following you, and you can push a little button, and you can sort them by their Clout score. Now, that doesn't mean that they love you more than someone with a low Clout score. It doesn't mean that they're more important or that they're smarter than a person with a low Clout score. But what it means is, when those people share your content, it's a big deal. When those people share content, their followers pay attention to it. They act on it. So it's one way to segment your audience and to take a look at, well, I've only got so much time. Who do I pay attention to? And by sorting people by their influence score, and there are lots of other measures out there, but Clout is still one of the main ones. I mean, a lot of advertising agencies won't admit this, but everybody uses Clout to some degree. Mm-hmm. I talked to this new agency last week, and they showed this like leaderboard, and they had their people's influence score. And I said, well, how'd you come up with the influence score? Is that Clout? And they said, well, it's kind of Clout plus. So I mean, Clout still has a very fundamental importance in the business today. People don't like to admit it, but it does.
It's interesting. Mark and I are part of a group of higher education social media professors, and one of the group members actually uses Clout in their grading. That if you don't reach a certain level, then they won't give you a grade, and that's and they keep it manageable where you can get to it. But I've seen in agencies if you don't have a clout score of 55 or above, need not apply. So that's kind of an interesting approach as well. And I mean, what they're trying to establish is that, like you said, that you have a reasonable understanding of how to use the tools. And you may have reach, you may not have reach, but honestly, it just shows that you're competent in the use of the tools.
Right, and I mean, it's something. If I was a student, I would pay attention to this. And the reason is, it's just like Jeremy said, a lot of companies are looking at this, and all things being equal, you know, if you've done well in school and you've had extracurricular activities and you have a clout score of 60 and someone else has a clout score of 15, they're going to hire the 60 because this shows that this person has really been immersed in social media. And almost every entry-level job today, whether you're in HR, you know, sales, service, marketing, PR, every entry-level job, you're going to be working and doing something with social media today. And so it can be a point of differentiation for you in the job market. And if you're the people interviewing you, if they don't understand what a clout score is, explain it to them. And the book that Jeremy is referring to is called Return on Influence, and it talks about how this works, about how people have built their personal power, their personal influence by learning how to ignite content on the web.
All right, questions. Questions from the classroom. I muted you guys. You can unmute now if you want.
There we go. Are we unmuted?
Yes.
Okay. Does it ever become a hassle to blog just because you're so well known for it? Do you ever feel obligated to do it?
Wow, that's a great question. I'm getting that feedback again, Jeremy.
Here you go. I'll mute it. It's fine.
Well, it's a surprisingly complicated question. Let me answer it two ways. First of all, I love to write, and I love the intellectual challenge of creating something interesting and entertaining and maybe even provocative in a little way. So I wrote a blog post today about a new way of thinking about how you can stand out on your blog. And I knew people would love this. It's really a different way of thinking about this. And I knew that it would connect with people. And that makes me excited. That brings me a lot of joy. I mean, the shelf life of that blog post is probably going to be about 3 or 4 days. And, I mean, it'll continue to pop up, and I'll continue to retweet it every now and then. It'll continue to grow a little bit over time. Who knows? It might be part of a book someday. Might be the genesis of an idea for a chapter of a book or something. But so I think if I wasn't having fun, and if I wasn't really enjoying it, that would show up. And the day that it's not fun anymore is the day I should probably quit. Now, it is hard work. So, I mean, I do have this obligation. I have kind of become part of people's lives. And sometimes I'm sick. Sometimes, I'm in a couple weeks, I'm going to be doing a speaking tour of India. That's many time zones away. And when I get there, I'm giving speeches from morning to night 3 days in a row. And I am going to be exhausted. And I'm not going to have time to blog. I'm not going to have time to really pay attention to the blog. So I'm going to have to figure out a system that week to kind of keep things going without me. And it may kind of feel like a burden in those times because it is hard work. You know, one of the examples that I use in the book is, believe it or not, Keith Urban. So I went to this Keith Urban concert, and he played for 2 hours, and he was exhausted. And then he played for another 40 minutes, and he played all the hits. He gave people exactly what they wanted. He was going through the audience, slapped high fives, giving away guitars until he had nothing left. And as the lights came up in the arena, I looked back at the arena, and he was sitting on the stage signing autographs. And I thought, that's how you have to stand out today in this competitive world. You got to give people everything, even when you think you've got nothing left. I mean, there was a guy on my blog. He was having troubles, and I said, "Look, I think you need somebody to talk to." And I was in a hotel room in some faraway city. I was so tired, but I just needed to connect with this guy. I wanted him to be able to count on me. And so I do give a lot. I do give a lot. And sometimes it does feel like an obligation. But, at least so far, after the first, I guess it's been 6 or 7 years, it feels like it's been worth it.
How about guest posting? Are you still, how many of your posts now, or what percentage is actually coming in from other writers?
My strategy on guest posting is simple. That I want to attain a level of consistency with how I publish that is more than I can write. If I could figure out a way to do nothing but blog and just make money on blogging, I would probably do it. But I've got a lot of other things that I love to do, and I really make no direct income from the blog. It's one of the most important activities that I do, but I don't make direct income from the blog. So my strategy is that I have a writer usually every Wednesday. I have a guest writer who I pay. And this is someone who I can count on. They're reliable. They're going to create a great, original, well-written post that I'm not going to have to edit. And the day that runs, they handle all the comments. So it's just reliable, great, original content. And it helps them because they get a tremendous amount of exposure. The people that I've had paid writers on my blog for, I think, 4 or 5 years, maybe 5 years now, and it's changed people's lives. The other thing I do is if someone from my blog community approaches me and they said, "I'd really like to put a guest post on your blog because I need the exposure," I will do everything I can to help them. But it has to be great, and I'm a tough editor. And things that might work on someone else's blog, it may not work on my blog because it's got to be insanely great. It's got to be original and thought-provoking, and it has to show some personality and some heart. And so it's not unusual. I mean, this week there's this young guy. He wants to write something on my blog. He gave me an idea, and I said, anybody in the world could write that. It's been written 1,000 times. Try again. He did a little better on a second. And I said, okay, but if you saw that in your email, would you really read that? You got to punch somebody. You got to punch them in the nose and say, you must read this. This is going to be the best thing you read this day. I'm giving you a chance to have a blog post in front of tens of thousands of people. This is your chance. Make them remember you. And I work them and work it and work it until it's something great. And usually they'll say it's the best blog post they've ever written, and it can give them a lot of exposure. It can change their lives. So I do it. I do guest posts to help my business, but also to help other people.
So that almost relates. One of the questions that came in on Twitter is, if we're new to blogging, what are the best ways to build allies or an audience? How does one get started with readers? And I think the key in what you just said was really the quality of content. I think that's a good question. You get this pride of authorship. You're looking at the content that you're writing. Sometimes it's hard to see it with that objective eye to go, would I share this? But how would you respond to Megan? How about building that audience from scratch?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, just around starting the blog. If you're really, really interested in it, and I hope that you are, I really hope that everyone listening tonight at least gives it a try. It's to create a personal brand, you've got to have a source of rich content that's something more than a Facebook post or a LinkedIn update. And typically that would be a blog, a podcast, or a video series. Blogging is probably the easiest and cheapest to get into. I've written a book called Born to Blog. It'll teach you how to, I think it's like $7 or $8 on Amazon. And if you really, really want it and you can't afford it, let me know. I'll send it to you. But I think it's like $7. So that would be a very good resource. Now, another really exceptional resource. Jeremy mentioned this Tao of Twitter book, or the Chinese pronunciation is Tao, T-A-O, Tao of Twitter. Chapter 5 in that book has 25 different ways to build your audience on Twitter. And building your audience on Twitter is the best way to build your audience for your blog. It's the fastest, most targeted way. Because if you build an audience on Twitter who is engaging with you, and they learn to like you, and they look for what you're saying, every once in a while, salt in a link to your blog post. And people will be fascinated with that. They'll be interested in that because they're already starting to get to know you on Twitter, and then they'll come to your blog. Becoming active in other people's blogs is a good way to get exposure. Doing some guest posts for other people's blogs, and the biggest advice I can give you is don't be obsessed with, I don't know what to write about, I don't know what my niche is, I don't know what my voice is. Just start. You're never going to find out unless you start writing. You're never going to be better next month if you don't start this month. And your voice and your niche will emerge over time. Give it your best shot. Think about what you might like to write about. Write down 25 headlines of blog posts you'd like to write. See if there's any theme there that it would be fun for you to sustain. But just get
not to interrupt, Mark, but I think that's one of the single best pieces of advice that you've ever given me, which it really helped me to step back and go, write 25 headlines, maybe make it better. But one of the things about no matter where somebody is, you have a closer view of what the problems in the industry are, or the problems that you're trying to solve are, than anybody else. Take those 25 themes and try and get them out there, and then it's surprising because I think in putting that into practice, you've got those headlines out there. You kind of know what the issues are.
Yeah.
It's funny how the pieces fall into place. Then it's like you're in the shower, you get this idea. It's like, I'm going to go write about this blog post. And I think that it really helps to get that wheel started because it's hard. I mean, the blank page, you know, I get it, and the writer, you know, staring at that blank page can be a challenge. But if you've got that starting point, it's much easier to get started. So,
yeah, you know, it's hard to get started. It's hard to get traction, but you know, it takes commitment. It takes, you know, it is you know, hard work today, but you will really save yourself a lot of time and effort if you know, learn from my mistakes and read what's in the Born to Blog book. The chapter 5 in the Twitter book is really helpful. I mean, it will. I mean, people write me all the time that they've doubled, they've tripled, they've quadrupled their audience in just a couple weeks by using the ideas in that book.
good. All right. Any more questions? All right. Well, Mark, I really appreciate you taking time tonight to join us. I know we went over a little bit, so
I'm happy to do it. It was fun.
Great. Well, with that, I guess we'll wrap up. I'll see everybody in Chattanooga next week. I don't know if we're doing a hangout. I think I'll be down there. But and Mark, I will see you very soon. I guess is it? Yeah, the next week is next Friday, right? The week after Friday. Well, I'll catch up with you on that.
Yeah, we got that thing in December.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Okay.
All right,
Take
well,
care.
thanks, everybody. See you later.
All right.